Rudyard Kipling and William Ernest Henley were contemporaries, living, working, and writing at the turn of the 20th century. These two men were authors, thinkers, and poets whose works have influenced culture and literature around the world for more than 100 years. Today, their writings are still widely read and discussed. The universal ideas and values which these two writers spoke about continue to deeply affect the minds of modern readers, and they are constantly developing. Two of the most famous and impactful poems written by Kipling and Henley are If and Invictus, respectively. These poems are thematically connected in that they convey ideas about the highest virtues one can have in the face of difficulty. That said, they're very different from each other in form, voice, and rhythm. The messages they express are similar but complementary. The skillfully crafted form of these poems combines with the contexts in which they are written to create two extremely powerful pieces of literature. Invictus by William Ernest Henley consists of 4 stanzas, each 4 short lines in length. Each of the stanzas in this poem makes a single statement in first-person diction. The tone of these statements is established without delay as the first stanza comes to a close. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. The tone of this poem is one of fierce optimism. The speaker, Henley himself, reinforces this tone line by line as he describes an array of difficulties that cannot break his spirit. All of this bolsters the poem's central theme of bravery in the face of tribulation. Lines like, "Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed," and "It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll," make this theme perfectly clear. The language used in this poem is straightforward. The poet does not use highly sophisticated words or sentence structures to convey his meaning. This gives each stanza the effect of getting its point across firmly and determinedly. Such an unambiguous mode of communication suggests that each statement is a word of absolute truth for the speaker. Imagery is used heavily throughout the poem to inspire vivid scenes in the mind of the reader, adding tremendously to the poem's power. In the first and second lines, "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole," an image of darkness is established, which sets the scene in the mind of the reader. This image is kept prominent by the line, "Looms but the horror of the shade." The physical and poetic darkness in the mind of the reader come together in one of the poem's most graphic lines, "My head is bloody, but unbowed." Invictus uses many poetic elements of sound to enhance the effectiveness of its words and to keep the reader captivated. The simple back-and-forth rhyme scheme that is consistent throughout the poem is foremost among these elements. Such a clean, consistent pattern provides a phonetically pleasing sound, holding the reader's attention. Iambic tetrameter is used as well to create a concise rhythm. The short lines of this form waste no time getting points across. Alliteration, assonance, and consonants are used skillfully throughout the lines to enhance the poem's sound. A careful reading of the poem will reveal examples of this in every stanza. One of the poem's most powerful lines, "Finds and shall find me unafraid," uses the F sound repeatedly, helping to make it one of the most outstanding statements in the stanza and in the work as a whole. Like Henley's Invictus, Kipling's If has a form that is carefully crafted and highly sophisticated, helping to make it another one of the most powerful and well-known poems of the 20th century. In its 4 stanzas, If uses careful word choice, artfully placed sound, and riveting figurative language to convey its message with many layers of power. One of the first types of word choice that can be noticed is the use of words with contradicting meanings. "If you can keep your head when all about you," and "are losing theirs and blaming it on you," are the first two lines of If. Here, the words keep and losing provide the first example in the poem of the use of opposite concepts to drive a point. Trust and doubt come in the third line, and winnings and loss come in the next stanza. Opposites are used repeatedly as the lines proceed, sometimes highlighting the better of two choices, and sometimes highlighting the similar value of two seemingly contradictory things. An example of this second type of highlight can be found in the last stanza. Foes and loving friends are referred to as two things that the audience should not allow to hurt them. In If, Kipling constantly uses extremely purposeful and intricate placements of sound to enhance the effect of the words. From the very start, the lines can be broken apart to reveal examples of expert use of rhyme, assonance, and consonance. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. These are the first four lines of the poem. These lines are tied tightly together by the repeated use of the ow and oo sounds in the terms about you, on you, doubt you, allowance, and doubting too. Consonance also adds to this effect through the similar consonant sounds of the B and D used in every line. All of this can be found in the first half of the first stanza, not to mention the expert placement of stressed and unstressed syllables. It would take many more pages to go through and analyze every beautiful line of sound in this poem. Suffice to say, these four lines are just the beginning. Also present are multiple instances of well-used figures of speech. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. The idiom keep your head is used in the very first line of the poem. This figure of speech provides the first piece of advice the speaker gives to the audience. It is better to maintain control of your mental facilities, even when the people around you are losing control of theirs. Personification is used as well. It shows up in the first line in the second stanza, when the speaker says, "If you can dream and not make dreams your master." Here, dreams become a character who should be listened to, but not given too much control. In the same stanza, triumph and disaster are referred to as impostors. An impostor is someone who pretends to be someone they are not. This implies that one must be careful not to assign unwanted value to their successes or their failures. Another figure of speech used in If is metaphor. One example of metaphor can be seen alongside vivid imagery at the end of the second stanza. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. A picture of a well-worn set of tools comes to the mind of the reader. This metaphor compares the weary soul of someone trying to rebuild their life with a set of overused mechanics tools. Each of the two poems I've discussed contain messages expressing universal truth. Lessons can be drawn from them which are applicable today as they will be in the future. However, a separate meaning can be discovered of these poems, one that is personal to their authors. This can be found by analyzing the life of each poet, centering on their motivations for writing. In the article Reflections of William Ernest Henley's Own Life Through the Poem Invictus, S.M. Faisal Arafat discusses the circumstances surrounding Henley's creation of the poem Invictus. He states that, at a young age of 12, Henley was diagnosed with tuberculosis of the bone. Around 13 years later, Arafat explains, Henley was checked into a British military hospital to undergo a pioneering treatment in hopes of avoiding a leg amputation. Henley spent the next 18 months confined to a hospital bed, but he did not allow the experience to break his spirit. He remained positive and kept his energy levels high, despite his difficulties. Learning the context surrounding the writing of Invictus adds deeper meaning to the poem. When the reader pictures the poet going through a painful 16-month recovery surrounding a second amputation that was avoided despite all odds, the words, "It matters not how straight the gate," take a whole new significance. If by Rudyard Kipling has an entirely different story behind its creation. The biographer Geoffrey Wansel gives a recount of the poem's origins in his article, "The Remarkable Story Behind Rudyard Kipling's If, and the Swashbuckling Renegade Who Inspired It." Dr. Leander Start Jameson was a good friend of Kipling's and a British military leader. In 1896, Jameson led a raid against the Boers of South Africa. The failed raid was so controversial that Jameson ended up going to prison in Britain for 15 months, taking the fall for the disputes among British political leaders. Kipling was so inspired by his friend's steadfast optimism throughout such a difficult series of events that he wrote the poem If, which went on to become his most celebrated piece of work. With this context in mind, the poem can be seen as a collection of powerful advice, as well as a story of deep admiration. Invictus and If were both written over 100 years ago. Their authors lived in a different time and therefore a different culture. However, people today are still repeating these lyrics. These two poems, each only 4 stanzas long, contain truths applicable across all time periods and all walks of life. When the reader considers the context in which they were written, and is immersed in their near perfection of their poetic form, he or she is left astounded. For centuries to come, Kipling and Henley will have readers asking themselves with earnest scrutiny, "Have I filled the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run? Can I be found unafraid?"